Hey, what's up, you guys? My name is Wolf, and welcome back to another episode of LEGO Arts. So, in the previous episode, we did a showcase and review on my White Vision custom minifigure, as well as Jack Bricks' Scarlet Witch minifigure. So, for this episode, we are going to a showcase that I've pushed off our stuff for quite a while and recently finished, and that is LEGO Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 2003 adaptation. So for our figures, we have all four turtles, Master Splinter, and the Shredder. I recently completed these guys and finally got around to recording this showcase. So a while back, I decided to go back and rewatch like the 2003 Turtles, because that was like the version of the Turtles I grew up with as a little kid, and I really enjoyed it. Despite some of the flaws, I still enjoyed it. It's still like a pretty cool little show. And I noticed that there's not very many like custom Ninja Turtles on this adaptation. So I decided to go ahead and give it a shot to see how it turned out, and I'd say this turned out pretty cool. There are a couple of changes I would have done, but I'll explain that as we go. Overall, though, I'm really excited to finally finish up the showcase, and I'll explain further on like why I kept pushing it off to begin with. So, as you guys know the drill, we're going to take these minifigures one at a time, do reviewing them, explain my process, why we have this route, and then go from there. So, without further ado, let's get the pedestal out and get the showcase on the road. Starting off with the turtles, we have Leonardo. So this turtle was the first one to get done, and that's because his design is slightly different. So when first doing all the turtles, they were pretty basic of like, they have kind of the same design, but I wanted to make each of them stand out in their own ways. And Leonardo was definitely one of the turtles I definitely wanted to make him a bit different from the others. So what I did for like the basic process for all the turtles, what I did was I used like a blank white minifigure for each of the turtles, sanded off the legs on the bottom, even though I really can't move them, sanded the sides, and basically did a full sanding around the entirety of the figure to sort of like get the base idea for the figure, and that way, since it's a blank canvas, I can just paint it up in the base color, and it would come out pretty good. Yeah, so for Leo's skin tone, I did a mint green, which I think looks really, really good. Really good. You can see on the arms, I did some detailing with like the elbow pads, and I used glove tops for the arms. That I got these from Nate's Minifigs that came in with the Boba Fett reforged armor. I might order some more in the future, for like future projects, because these worked out pretty good. I do like how they came out. The head is probably one of the more difficult areas, as I wanted to match up like the facial expression that Leo has in his adaptation. So I like that various like wallpapers to get like the exact kind of facial expressions. The eyes were pretty easy to paint in. I first painted up the mask in like this dark blue coloration. I even sanded off the back of the mask with the little tail pieces on the back. I didn't like how small they were, so I sanded those off and then sculpted on some new ones which I think look way more accurate. The shell, I gave off a new paint coating as well. The mouth was probably the trickiest, as I've mentioned in the past before. Mouths painting on from minifigures is very tricky. Luckily, I was able to get this in a position that I kind of liked. Probably could change up the teeth a little bit, but it's still good. Oh, pretty good. So we do like it with that. Anyway, that's on the rest of the figure. One of the designs that stands out Leo from the others is this shoulder strap that goes around the belt. And goes all the way around the shoulder and shell, connecting to the back of the belt. I really like that. I almost thought about sculpting on like a sheath for the katanas, but since I wouldn't be putting them in the back, I felt that like it was kind of pointless, and that's alright. Some detailing more like with the legs, I added in like the knee pads, if we position them a little bit, but you can see like I did some slight detailing. This was actually where I ran out of like with my old black acrylic marker and had to switch to a different one. You could kind of see like on the two pads, but that's alright. But I got a new marker. I painted up the straps all the way around the figure, trying to line them up as best I could. Not terrible, but of course, a couple of fixes could have been going on there. I did also sand off like this connector pad. The neck connection that was connected to the shell, I sanded off completely and super glued it onto the back. Glued it onto the back of the shell, and it came out pretty good. With the torso, with like the abdomen of the shell, this is completely Procreate clay that I also took an Exo knife and carved off like the components of the shell. I probably could have highlighted them more in black, but I honestly didn't think about that until after I put on the straps on the turtles. So it was kind of pointless. And then with the rest of the belt, I used electric tape to just wrap around the shell, wrap around the torso, and connect it onto the back, which came out pretty very good. And finally, I got like these katana blades from Firestar Toys that turned out pretty good. I thought about painting up the blue handles, but in the past, painting up handles has always been a problem, especially when the paint chips off once it goes onto the figure. So I didn't want to go through that process and decided to we'll skip it through. And since I wouldn't be taking these off him anyways, I'd say it turns out alright. Alright, overall, I really, really like how this looks out. It's kind of a simple design, but at the same time, pretty creative, and overall, a pretty cool figure. Alright, the next few should go by pretty quickly, as the process was pretty much the same, but in different forms. So next up we have is Donatello. So with this guy was pretty much easier to do, as he was like the base idea for the other turtles. Only thing that I changed up with Leo was adding in like an extra strap. So this should go on by pretty fast. So how we did with Donnie was, again, I wanted to do like a different skin tone to like make him stand out more, which I really like this one. It looks pretty, really good. I also repainted up his mask in a different purple. Added in like some new tail, some new like mask tails on the back. The glove tops, the abdomen is the same. I probably could have done like more outlining on that, but I didn't realize that until after putting on the belts, which is fine. It's fine. The mouth is a little bit crooked. I tried to like give him almost like that sort of neutral smirk he kind of has, which I don't even know what that is. I'm just making up stuff, but overall, it's not terrible. I still think it looks pretty good. And of course, like, he's got his bow staff, which part of me wants to take off, but at the same time, I put on like some glue as a base, so I don't think I really can, and also I don't want to ruin the paint. So looking at the bow staff itself, it was something that I also wanted to do. Different variations that LEGO has done for a Donatello figure. The figure has mostly been like 2 brown rods connected to a connector piece, as the bow staff, or just using like a bow staff with like a round top, like a cylindrical part at the top. I liked the base of that staff, but I didn't like the cylindrical part. So I took my Dremel tool and sanded that off, and pretty much just sanded the rest of this off because I wanted to have it give it a more wooden kind of look. To really make it look like a battle bow. People keep making jokes that like Donnie has a staff that constantly breaks. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a battle staff. It's supposed to be a battle bow, which those ones are stronger than regular bows, because they're made to take a beating. Only reason that it breaks is because it's striking against stuff like metal and everything. So I think he's just using a stronger bow, but in the context of when he's in fights, that's why it pretty much breaks. But going past that, everything else is pretty much the same process as I did for Leonardo. Again, the only things really different are different colors for the mask and skin tone, as well as different facial expressions. So a different facial expression and a different weapon. And while the weapon probably could have been done in a much better way, I still like it. And overall, this is still a cool figure, and it really came out pretty good. All right, next up on our list is Raphael. So with this one, he had the easiest face to do, because when I purchased like the head base for this guy, I bought like his more angered expression, because that's always with Raph's kind of shtick. He's pretty much like the strong and angry one of the group. So the mouth was already good. All I did was just repaint it up the skin tone and in like this different, like this grass green, which I think looks really good. I repainted up the mask, added the tails on the back. You can kind of see that some extra red did drip onto the shell, but unfortunately I forgot exactly how I made this color, so I wasn't able to replicate that. So I just left it as it was, but it's not too big of a deal. It doesn't really stand out quite as much. Of course, painted out the white eyes, and the rest of the body was pretty simple. Although out of all the turtles, this one took a lot of coats of paint for some reason. Because I think about like 3 to 4 coats just to make sure that all the excess white was gone. And it was just an endless process of like, okay, do all of this and make sure that it doesn't stand out too much, but it still looks good. Again, the abdomen is like Procreate clay, the belts, electric tape glued onto the shell. Got the glove tops, tops, and it's the elbow and knee pads. And of course, he's not Raphael without his size. So the size that I first was going to purchase from Firestar Toys, they were supposed to be like complete silver. And silver. Oh, actually, no, not complete silver. They were supposed to be like silver with like a black handle, but they emailed me back and saying that like we are unfortunately out of this product, but we can substitute with a different one. So I decided to go ahead with some black size, and paint up the handles, paint up the blade portion in silver, and it looks pretty cool. You can kind of see that the black is still slightly exposed, but I actually like it because it kind of shows sort of like years of using them almost like wear down kind of. So in a way, it's kind of cool as it sort of shows the battle damage that takes over the years with Raph fighting. And overall, still a pretty cool figure. Again, the mouth was the easiest, as I just left the mouth as it was. And overall with this figure, I really like it. It's still cool. Last up for the turtles, we have Michelangelo. So I'd say out of all the turtles, this one had the most difficulty when it came to the base painting, as well as the facial expressions. So with Mikey, I definitely wanted to get like his sort of, since he's always like the excited one. He one of the various like wallpapers up there shows him with like sort of this crazed, excited smile with his tongue sticking out. So I wanted to capture that for him. It was a pain to try and get a good angle and try and carefully paint this on without it coming off super weird. It still looks a little weird, but I luckily did paint it in a way that it could pass off as being better, which you could kind of see like on the mouth, like this one random white spot that almost stands out a bit more than the other ones. The tongue almost looks a little weird. It's a little weird, and in general, it could have been done a little bit better, but white paint for some reason on figures is a pain in the ass to get on. I have no idea why, but that was the case, and it was like, God, fine. And so I worked with what I got, and while it definitely could have been better, it's not exactly terrible. Now, onto why the base coating was a bit trickier than the others. Mikey has two different base coats, base colors, from what I've seen in the Turtles. So like the first 5 seasons, he had kind of a more faded skin tone that was similar to Raph's. And later adaptations, he had this aquamarine greenish kind of color. I decided to go ahead with the aquamarine greenish because it would stand out a little bit more, and I don't know how it would do the faded green out without making it resemble too much of Raph. So I wanted to do the lighter tone. It took various tries to try and get a skin tone to match up well, but I luckily was able to find a clear coating, and it was I definitely had to try and remember which colors I use, especially when attaching on the weapons, because the paint would chip off. Anyways, though, the rest of the figure is pretty much the same as the others. And there's redid the mask, and the mask shaved off the connector on the shell. The shell super glued to the back, the belt and the pads, and everything's pretty much the same. He's also got like these nunchucks and these nunchuck pieces that I think this was a new Lego idea that they did for one of their minifigure series. I purchased a couple of these from Firestar Toys. And while the chain does kind of make them a little bit bulky, it's still pretty cool. It still matches up with like Mikey's whole shtick of using nunchucks, and it's still pretty cool. Again, the mouth could have been done a little bit better, but outside of that, this is still a fun figure to do, and I really like it. Next up on our list we have is Master Splinter. So when doing this guy, was both a little easier than the Turtles, but at the same time kind of difficult. So when first doing Splinter, I wanted to number one match up with the size that Splinter has compared to the Turtles, as he is shorter, but also to get like his kimono as accurate as I possibly could. So how I first did this was I first had like the base body underneath. It was just a brown torso with some arms from, again, Firestar Toys. I purchased a lot of the stuff from Firestar, but I did the base for that. I had some spare gray minifigure hands that I use for him, and then the head is the same head that I used for the 2014 was that when the movie came out? But the Michael Bay adaptation of the Ninja Turtles. While the movie itself itself could have been better. I did like that Lego decided to reuse the same Splinter head that they used for the 2012 adaptation of the Turtles for Splinter. Because production-wise, it would have been easier to do that than try to come up with a whole new head altogether. And I'm glad they did. Because this was actually a good base head to use for Splinter. The only changes up that I made for this one was I painted up his eyebrows, repainted the nose, and repainted his small beard. Everything else came pretty simple. But the rest of the stuff with his kimono, it was probably the trickiest because you can kind of see all these cuts around the figure. And pretty much what I did was I just literally took pieces of fabric, cut them up in specific areas. First, I did like the shoulders. And then just cut random pieces of fabric and just glued them onto the figure to try and fill in the gaps. And then just use paints to try and fill in the rest. Rest of the gaps here and there. And a little bit tricky to do, but I was able to pull it off with the detailing. Like first I did the outlines on the kimono with like the belt and everything. And then I went back with the black marker to do the outlining work on this one because the two browns kind of blended in together. So I wanted to make sure that they would stand out apart from each other. And of course on the back I sculpted out his tail with Procreate clay. And clay, you can see where it catches on with the rest of the kimono, but that's fine. And then his cane, I was hoping to use a smaller rod piece that Lego has, but it has. At first I had one of these, but then I lost it, and I didn't really have enough time to purchase a new one. So I decided to go ahead and just take a Lego rod. Cut it down to the bottom and use that for Splinter's cane. I'll probably replace it in the future, but for now, this is still a good representation for the character, and overall, a pretty cool character. And last up on our list, the main villain of the series, the Shredder. This was definitely a character that I felt I had to make for the showcase, because Shredder has always been a part of the Turtles since the very beginning, and I felt it was only appropriate to include this guy into the showcase. Okay, so when making Shredder, it was a kind of trickier, especially with the whole direction that I went for this guy. So how I first did this was I first actually did like the sculpting work before I did any of the paint work. And the sculpting for this guy was a bit tedious for the various areas that I used. So as you can see, like on his arms, he's got like his shoulder armor as well as like the spikes on his gauntlets. So moving his back a little bit, I can't fully bend it this way, so we have to move it here. Moving his back, we can see on the shoulder pads, he's got like 3 spikes. And spikes going on top. Doing the spikes individually for this guy was a pain all on its own. Because when I did the spikes, I took small pieces of clay and just carefully put them on the arms, the shoulders, and even the legs. This was tedious because I wanted to make sure that each of them were small enough to put onto the figure, but positioned correctly where they'd be close to accuracy as possible. But it was annoying. So I was glad to have been able to get that done. And then like on his left arm, of course, he's got his signature gauntlet, with his claws. I did have to re-glue them on at one point. But luckily they didn't get damaged, and I was still able to utilize them. You can kind of see that the paint does bleed in between them, but it's not too big of a deal. But I definitely wanted to sculpt on my own instead of using like a Lego brand version of that, because not terrible, but it looks extremely bulky, and I didn't like it. Now onto the rest of the figure. Here's the figure here. I did like the torso work before I added on like the fabric pieces. This was like one of my first attempts of painting on an actual torso. In hindsight, I probably could have printed off a minifigure torso and then just painted up that way, as I do with like some female torsos that I've done in the past. But that process did not occur to me again until after I finished it. So I was like, fine, I'll just go ahead with the rest the rest. The fabric pieces are just various pieces of fabric that I glued on. And on, like, first I did the underlayer with like the hip armor, and then like this one triangle for the front part of it. This fabric sash that I wrapped all the way around, and then included in some extra pieces. This is like down here with like some extra tethering, and of course the Foot Clan symbol, and symbol that's sculpted out of Procreate clay and glued it on here, and it came out really good. Really good. I also went in and did some like extra detailing with like some wrinkles in there, just to give it a little bit more of an effect to it. And then the helmet was something that I probably could have just left as it was, but again, wanted to make it as accurate as I could. I took like a brown shredder helmet, painted up in the base on like dark gray, and then went back first. First sanded off the horns and sculpted out some new ones, and then went back and did the outer layer, the base on gunmetal gray, which looks really cool, and then the top part silver. The head I actually have underneath. I can actually remove this. The head underneath is a minifig head that I think was covered in Sharpie. I have no idea what it was supposed to be. But I used this as like the base template, and carefully painted on the red eyes that Shredder has. You can easily see of like how messed up the head is, but I chose this head because with the helmet attached onto this guy, and since I wouldn't be removing it that much, I just put it on, and it perfectly covers up all the damage, and the eyes are still evidence. I can kind of do some rotation with this one. Compared to the other ones, but again, because of like the fabrics in the clay, it does block that off. But that's alright, because this was still a cool character, and in my opinion, I feel that this version of Shredder, the 2003 Shredder, is like one of the perfect representations of what Shredder is supposed to be. I felt that like he was just pure evil, no remorse, just wanted to destroy everything. This was the version that I feel like really stood out for the Shredder. So to actually make him as a minifigure was pretty fun to do. And that is going to do it for this episode of LEGO Arts. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, this was a fun project to do, and I'm really glad that I got around to finishing this up, because I started on this a while ago, but I'm glad I finished this up. I didn't do any more characters because I wanted to just focus on these 6 in particular. If I do characters like April and Casey in the future, those most likely would just be quick builds, as there's not really a lot of customization to put into those characters. But that would be something for another time. Now, one of the reasons why I kept pushing this off was because like outside life, I've been experimenting with some other stuff. Like, if you've been keeping up with my Instagram, I've recently been starting to get more into 3D printing. I still have not like made any models of my own making, because it's really hard to use, because the software, I'm having difficulty following along with it, so I'm still practicing on that. But I have been reaching out to some other 3D printer artists to like get some ideas here and there. And I have been working more and more on the God of War Ragnarok project. It's still on hold until we get more photos of the rest of the characters. But I have been, but if you've been keeping up with Instagram, I have been working on making stuff like Mjolnir, to sort of see where it goes. And I'm not going to show it, but I think I did get a model that's close to accuracy as possible. I don't know if I'll try again in the future, but it is getting better. I'm also working on another project that I will not going to say what it is, but it's getting close to being done. So I'm really excited to do that. And overall, just some other stuff that I've been waiting for, like still waiting for a lot of stuff from Nate's Minifigs, and some other stuff, still waiting for that in the future, and has kind of gone to a point that I have no idea when it's coming in. But I'm hoping it will come at some point soon. Again, I have no idea when. But until then, I'm just trying to keep up with like as much stuff as I can. And I did recently get like a bunch of other minifigures that I'll probably put together in the future. And overall, just trying to keep up with specific projects while wanting to get on to other stuff. It's become quite a hassle. Here and there. But I still go with it as much as I can. I do plan to get back to Let's Plays. Especially now that I finished up this one. I'll probably go back to either the PC, the PS5, Here's 5. We'll see where it goes. But overall, I think that is going to be it. So, if you guys would like to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. Do build houses, last of Lego products, and with that, I'm so fun. So overall, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you all next time in the next video. Bye-bye!